are out there? You know, what other ways of doing ethnography? What other ways of deconstructing knowledge can we actually apply? And so yeah, unlearning, like being willing to unlearn a lot of these sort of like cognitive biases and imperialisms, I think is really, really important. And also like what I felt as well was, you know, some authors sort of like Edward Said or Spivak were kind of thrown into the mix, to kind of give this post-colonial, you know, edge to it. But then it's just kind of there for a tick boxing exercise, I felt. Kind of like, okay, we've covered these, we've covered post-colonial theory, or we've covered this. And it doesn't actually, it didn't feel like, there was an ongoing sort of like it filtering in of all of that through the rest of the readings. I know that, for example, in Anthropology of Politics, were like exclusively pretty much like white males, European males, and except for like Akila Membe, like at the end. So it was all very kind of like, what? How are we, I don't know, it was, at times it just felt kind of like I was in this old school philosophy, like Greek course. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to focus the question more, but,
yeah, so the next point is about discrimination. So we wanted to really dig into that in the interview, since we didn't do it really in the survey, and I think it's important to talk about more, to be more qualitative. So, like, did you or anyone you know experience discrimination within the context of LSE?
I personally didn't, but I had incidences outside of LSE with LSE people that were a bit, I don't know, I don't know how to classify it, but it was when debates left the classroom that, perhaps people started attaching, obviously it becomes a personal sort of process of digestion, and yeah, there were instances where sort of your opinion becomes diluted into an emotional response, for example. So I remember at some points making an argument, you know, to someone that asked for my opinion. It's like, oh, you're so emotional, about this. Like maybe like, I don't know, just stuff like that, but it didn't really affect me, if that makes sense. It was just kind of, incidences that kind of showed that there's a lot to deconstruct also in this knowledge and like this whole rationality around it. And that I think goes with like unlearning knowledge, because I think anthropology necessarily is like necessarily and inherently a positioned, non-neutral discipline. And like the anthropologist is not neutral ever. You cannot consider yourself neutral when you're embedded in that social field and in the space that you're, supposedly extracting knowledge and producing knowledge with. So this sort of like arrogance of objectivity, it was, what I found most troubling. But it's not really discrimination, it's just arrogance.
So it was arrogance on the syllabus, on the readings, on the content of the anthropology course, or more on the individuals? Did it concern?
Well, both, I think, because when you're getting fed content that, you know, and that reinforces kind of like this hierarchy of knowledge that you're placing yourself at the top of, then it reinforces, but it's a mutual reinforcement.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, about this experience, nothing was done afterwards about it. Yeah, it was. Do you feel like it was more sexist or more?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And no, because it happened outside of. I mean, those kind of things are sort of like interpersonal, and they happen outside of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was any moment where I felt really targeted inside the classroom, or I did feel uncomfortable at times, or less comfortable speaking, but I couldn't say that I was, upset or that I had to bring it up with someone else or anything.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. About the diversity of student staff body, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's just the same stuff. Like, you need 1,000 titles with 1,000 papers published in your name, in the same journals, that credit you in the way that means that you're a valid voice and you're qualified and you're legitimate authority on a specific knowledge. And I think I'd love to see other types of, trajectories, other types of backgrounds, and not just like having a diverse and colorful staff, because there are people from great, diverse regions, but also like in more, perhaps exploring more radical fields, like pushing a bit more towards visual anthropology or towards other methodologies of working in the class and in teaching, but also in their own work. Yeah, I think the methodological aspect was quite lacking. I know that it wasn't a research master, so it was it was a, what do they call it? A class?
MSc, like, course,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Scientific stuff. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it wasn't like an MRes. So, the methodology wasn't really part of it, but it would have been really much better to have been able to get a wider, spectrum of possibilities in ways that research can be done and undertaken, and how we can see research. And yeah, just that methodological aspect, I think, should have been more, present. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, don't get me wrong, I'm super glad to have studied there. It's a huge opportunity, and it was an amazing opportunity for me. And I did learn a lot. However, I do think that it's still, the anthropology department prides itself on like its past glory. And especially like, the Seligman sort of tribute and all of these big names that have come out of it. And it like needs to do a lot more to regain that and to keep up with all the amazing stuff that's happening on what they call the margins, quote unquote, which is really fascinating stuff, from like epistemological, breakthrough, breakthroughs in methodologies in Latin America, which are just breaking so many boundaries, and they're so beyond so many obstacles that the North and European institutions are still facing, which is like, oh, how can we think of like decoloniality, is that a thing? Is that a concept?